For 50 years, the world knew Chris Evert as the Ice Maiden, a flawless, untouchable competitor who never cracked under pressure, never showed weakness, and never let anyone see her bleed. She was America's tennis princess, a woman who controlled every situation with her legendary two-handed backhand and an emotional fortress so thick that opponents were just looking at her stone-cold face across the net. Control was everything to her. It was her identity, her weapon, her religion. But in December 2021, all that control was ripped away in a single moment inside a cold hospital room when doctors told her she had stage 1C ovarian cancer, the same brutal disease that had already stolen her sister. It started 2 years earlier. In February 2020, Chris lost her sister Jean Evert Dubin to ovarian cancer at just 62 years old. Watching Jean suffer, watching medicine fail her, watching her body wither day by day, left a wound in Chris that never fully healed. But beyond the grief, there was a deeper, quieter terror, a question about what lived inside their shared bloodline. That fear turned into a nightmare in October 2021, when genetic experts re-examined a frozen blood sample from Jean and discovered a dangerous mutation in the BRCA1 gene. The message was urgent and terrifying. Chris needed to get tested immediately. She didn't hesitate. Chris underwent a preventive hysterectomy in December 2021, believing she was being proactive, getting ahead of fate. She walked into that operating room like she always walked onto court, composed, strategic, ready. But when she woke up, the doctors didn't reassure her. They delivered a verdict she never prepared for. The cancer wasn't just a risk anymore. It was already there, silent and deadly, hiding exactly the way it had hidden inside her sister. Stage 1C ovarian cancer. The Ice Maiden had been ambushed in that quiet hospital room. For the first time in decades, Chris Evert completely fell apart. She wasn't a champion anymore. She was just a woman, terrified, alone, staring down the same road her sister had walked to her death. Chemotherapy loomed ahead, promising to steal her strength, her hair, and possibly her life. She had no rule book for this. There were no white lines, no referee, no opponents she could read and outmaneuver. Cancer played by no rules she understood. She called her children first. She said what mothers say. The forced, steady words meant to hold the family together even when you're drowning inside. But after she hung up, she sat alone in the silence, and a strange, desperate urge overtook her. She picked up her phone and stared at a name she had stared at across a net for 15 years. A name that once activated every fighting instinct in her body. She called Martina Navratilova. The phone rang. Martina picked up, bright and warm as always. "Hey, Chrissy, what's up?" That cheerful voice, carrying his familiar Eastern European accent, broke something open inside Chris. The dam she had been holding up her entire life collapsed in an instant. "Martina," she said, and her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the voice of an 18-time Grand Slam champion. It was the voice of a woman who had just seen the shadow of death fall across her bed. "I have it, Martina. Ovarian cancer. Stage 1C. Exactly like Jean." Then came the words that shocked the tennis world when they were later revealed. Words that no one who knew Chris ever could have ever imagined hearing from her lips. She began to cry. Not quiet, controlled tears. Deep, choking sobs. And through them, she confessed a truth she had never told anyone, not even herself. "I'm scared, Martina. I saw how Jean died. I know this road. The needles, the pain, the way your body disappears. And for the first time in my life, I am truly terrified. I don't know if I have enough strength to get through it." On the other end of the line, Martina Navratilova, a woman who never hid her tears, who wore her fire openly, went completely still. For her, hearing Chris Evert say those words was like watching the sky fall. Chris was the bedrock, the counterweight, the ice that balanced Martina's flame for 50 years. And now the ice was melting with fear. Martina felt a sharp, aching pain crack through her chest. Not triumph, but pure, raw empathy. In that moment, every wall between them dissolved. Chris kept talking, her voice steadier now, but soaked in honesty. "You are the strongest person I know, Martina. I always watch you compete. Now I need to borrow some of that strength. I can't do this alone. It was the most extraordinary confession a champion could make, setting aside a lifetime of ego, a lifetime of pride, to say, "You are my measure of strength and I need you." Martina wept openly, not out of pity, but out of overwhelming gratitude for the trust Chris had handed her. She understood exactly how much courage it cost an ice maiden to say, "I am afraid." When the call ended, Martina sat alone in her room. Then she stood, walked to her vanity, and opened a velvet box. Inside was a Cartier necklace, a gift Chris herself had given her on her 60th birthday. Martina picked it up, felt its weight in her palm, and clasped it around her neck. Standing before the mirror, she made a vow. She would not remove that necklace. Not once. Not for a single second. Until Chris Evert was completely cancer-free. That necklace went everywhere. Into the shower, into bed, to TV commentary booths, to every social event. For 6 months, it never left Martina's neck. Every time she touched it, it was a reminder and a message sent across the distance to Chris that she was not fighting alone. On video calls, Martina would unconsciously reach up and touch it, as if trying to push strength through the screen. She told Chris funny stories. She urged her to eat. She refused, flatly and fiercely, to let Chris give up. Chris completed 6 rounds of chemotherapy. In May 2022, doctors declared her cancer-free. Martina, perhaps the happiest person alive that day, finally unclasped the necklace, her vow fulfilled. But fate was not finished. Just 6 months later, in November 2022, Martina discovered a swollen lymph node in her own neck. The diagnosis was devastating. Throat cancer and breast cancer simultaneously. The woman who had just spent half a year as a guardian angel was now the one who needed saving. Chris didn't hesitate for a single moment. With her own hair barely grown back, her body still recovering, she stepped forward. "Now it's my turn," she told Martina. "I've walked through that minefield. I know every hole, every trap. Take my hand. I will lead you." She warned Martina about the metallic taste that chemotherapy leaves in your mouth. She guided her on choosing headscarves. She shared every quiet, hard-won lesson that no doctor had ever taught her. The two women who once mapped each other's weaknesses to win Grand Slams were now mapping a cancer war together to survive. In June 2023, Martina Navratilova was declared cancer-free. In November 2023, at the WDA Finals in Cancun, both women stood together on a podium, hair grown back, smiles radiant, hands clasped. They had started as enemies. They had become the reason each other fought to live. Chris said later that calling Martina on the day she learned she was sick was the wisest decision of her entire life. If she had stayed silent, if she had kept the Ice Maiden mask in place and tried to appear strong, the loneliness alone might have killed her before the cancer could. And if she had never opened that door, Martina would never have loved her deeply enough to later be saved by that same love in return. Their story is not just about tennis or rivalry or even survival. It is about what happens when you find the courage to admit that you are afraid, and what becomes possible when you do.